gentlemen, today's lecture is with regard to the inguinal canal and the contents. You see, if you can remember last week we discussed about the anterior abdominal wall. And I'm sure you can remember that anterior abdominal wall has about 5 to 6 layers. The first layer we said is the outermost one is the skin, followed by the superficial fascia, which consists of the fatty layer and the membranous layer. You can also remember that we said there is absence of deep fascia in the abdomen. Why? Because of the pregnancy, coughing, eating, and so on and so forth. That if there is deep fascia there, probably pregnancy and eating to fill in your stomach may not likely be possible. After the superficial fascia, the next layer we said is the muscular layer. And the muscular layer we said consists of 3 important muscles. We discussed about the external oblique muscle and its own aponeurosis, internal oblique muscle and its own aponeurosis, and transversus abdominis, which is the deepest, which we have already said that. Then deep to the muscular layer, we said there is a fascia there, what we call the transversalis fascia, and deep to it we have the extraperitoneal part. Deep to it we have the parietal peritoneum. Then from there you enter into the abdominal cavity. So what we are going to discuss today is with regard to this anterior abdominal wall. That is what we call the inguinal canal that is related to the anterior abdominal wall. This inguinal canal is not actually a canal like you understand. It's a passage. It means a pathway or a passage through which something passes through. This inguinal canal came into being as a result of migration of testicles from the posterior abdominal wall. So if this is the posterior abdominal wall here, so on either side, during intrauterine life, the testicles or the ovaries in women, testicles in men, they develop from the posterior abdominal wall, one on either side. We have 2 ovaries, and then we have 2 testicles. So you have one on the right and one on the left. And so during intrauterine life, in the posterior abdominal wall, each of these testicles, if it is a baby boy or if it is a baby girl, the ovaries, they migrate after they developed. And then they come downward. And then they pass through one canal and comes out of the canal and stay in the testicles. Our testicles are enclosed within scrotum. So it means that our testicles, they were initially developed in the posterior abdominal wall, so they now took a journey. They traveled. You see, migration started right in utero. I'm sure most of you have migrated from the village to the city. I'm sure some of you were from far village, and now you are in the city. You have migrated. So also testicles or ovaries, they migrated. So our own testicle migrated all the way from inside the abdomen. They now created a passageway to come and stay into the scrotum outside. And that was how this inguinal canal came into being. With regard to the women, the ovaries also took a journey the same as that of the testes. They also created that canal, and then they now enter into the labia majora because they don't have scrotum. So the ovaries, they retained, the ovaries retained in the abdomen, they retained in the pelvic cavity, and then the round ligament passes through and then get enclosed into the labia majora on either side. And so that's the difference between that of a man and that of a woman. So it's like the gonads are the source of the creation of this inguinal canal. So now what is inguinal canal? As I told you initially, inguinal canal is a passageway that is approximately 4 centimeters in length. That means from its beginning to its end is about 4 centimeters. And it lies about 0.5 inch above and parallel to the ilioinguinal ligament. If you can remember, we talked about ilioinguinal ligament. That is the rolling fibers of the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle of the abdomen. So the aponeurosis of that muscle rolls in what? To form this inguinal ligament. You see, so the inguinal ligament begins from anterior superior iliac spine, what we call a cyst, and then it passes obliquely downward and medially to get attached to the pubic tubercle. Are you clear? So inguinal ligament now begins from the anterior superior iliac spine, passes downward and medially to get attached to the pubic tubercle. You get it? And so we said it is the roll-in fibers of the aponeurosis of the lower aspect of the external oblique muscle of the abdomen. So this inguinal canal lies 0.5 inch above and parallel to the medial half of this inguinal ligament. So if you divide the inguinal ligament into two equal halves, medial half and lateral half, you get it? So the medial half of the inguinal ligament, this inguinal canal lies parallel to it, 0.5 inch above it. You get it? And then we said that it is approximately 4 centimeters in length. Are you all clear? Now we've seen the definition of the inguinal canal. So this inguinal canal has some walls. It has two walls, anterior wall, posterior wall, roof, and a floor. It's just like if I now remove this inguinal canal and I put it here, and I take it something like a prism or rectangular structure like this. Are you clear? Something like this. Those of you that have done technical drawing may understand what I mean by this. So something like this. So if I now remove half of this, this is the one, and then I put the remaining aspect in dotted line. So the posterior wall is this one. So this is the posterior wall here. That is the wall deeper, the deeper wall. So the posterior wall of the inguinal canal, if you can remember, we discussed about the transversalis fascia. So the transversalis fascia completely forms the posterior wall. So this is the posterior wall that is completely formed by the transversalis fascia. Are you clear? So we have now seen that the posterior wall of the inguinal canal is mainly formed by the transversalis fascia. Anteriorly here, if you know, the most superficial aponeurosis, where you remove the skin and the superficial fascia, is aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle. So the majority of the anterior wall here is formed by the external oblique aponeurosis. So if I now put this here, so the lateral 2/3 of the inguinal canal here, its own anterior wall is formed by the external oblique aponeurosis. If you can remember, we said the deeper muscle to the external oblique is the internal oblique. And if you can remember its own origin, we said it also originated from the lateral half of the inguinal ligament. So since its fibers originate from the lateral half of the inguinal ligament, so it means some of its fibers, as it acts, it can also contribute to the formation of the anterior wall of the inguinal canal. So some of the fibers of the internal oblique muscle, they also contribute to the lateral 1/3 of the anterior wall of the internal of the inguinal canal. So we have seen that the anterior wall of the inguinal canal is mainly formed by the aponeurosis of the external oblique plus the internal oblique muscle of the abdomen as it passes upward and medially to get upward. So the flow of the canal, which is this one, is formed by the flow of the medial half of the inguinal ligament. So this flow, which is this one, is formed by the medial half of the inguinal ligament. So the inguinal ligament forms the flow. Are you clear? While we say the posterior wall is formed by the transversalis fascia, the anterior wall is formed by the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle of the abdomen and some part of the aponeurosis of the internal oblique muscle. So what happens to the roof? So the roof, as these internal oblique muscles, they pass upward and medially. Some of the fibers, they arc over. That means as they are going up like this, some of them, they arc over to go behind the canal. So that at the end of the day, as they arc over from here, if this is part of the inguinal ligaments, they pass from there, so they arc like this. So that they reinforce some of the part of the posterior wall. You get it? So part of the posterior wall of the inguinal canal is formed by the arching fibers of the internal oblique muscle. So as they arc up, each of these fibers, as they arc up, they form the rope. They rope the canal, and then some of the fibers, as they now pass behind, anterior to the transversalis fascia, to get inserted on the pubic tubercle here. If this is a pubic tubercle, so the fibers, as they insert there now, they now reinforce the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. So also, we said that deep to this internal oblique, we also have transversus abdominis. So some of the fibers of the transversus abdominis, they connive with the fibers of the internal oblique so that they complete the rope of the inguinal canal. And then the fibers, they join together to lie anterior to the lateral 1/3 of the transversalis fascia, forming the posterior wall of the inguinal canal, so that they form a common tendon, what we call conjoint tendon. So this conjoint tendon inserts on the pubic tubercle. So that means the conjoint tendon is mainly formed by the union of the internal oblique muscle and the transversus abdominis, thereby reinforcing the lateral 1/3 of the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. So now we have seen the posterior wall, the anterior wall, the floor, and the roof of the canal. So where does the canal begin? The canal begins from inside. On the posterior, if I draw this posterior wall like this, and this is the floor of the canal, for example. So on the posterior wall here of the inguinal canal, there is a defect, what you call deep inguinal ring. We call it what? Deep inguinal ring. This deep inguinal ring is like when the testes are coming down from the posterior abdominal wall. As they come towards the inner aspect of the posterior anterior abdominal wall, they have to perforate the transversalis fascia before they now come out. So because they come along together with, it's not like they are holding the transversalis fascia, but rather they are pushing the transversalis fascia so that they come along with the transversalis fascia together and as a coverance with it. I don't know that you understand my point. I will show you maybe later on if we go along. So as they come from inside, the testicles, they get covered with the transversalis fascia, and then they come through, they come and create this canal, come out. As they are coming out, they take the transversalis fascia, take the aponeurosis of the transversus abdominis, and then take the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle and that of the internal oblique muscle of the abdomen. So now we've seen the inguinal canal. What are the contents of the inguinal canal? Inguinal canal has about 15 contents in both male and female. But mainly, if you now dissect the cadaver, what you are going to see is only two things. In female, you will only see the round ligament of uterus as well as the ilioinguinal nerve. In males, you are going to see the spermatic cord and the ilioinguinal nerve. It is only when you dissect the spermatic cord, that is when you are going to see the 15 contents I'm talking about. You get my point? So in the female, you only have one round ligament of uterus and the ilioinguinal nerve. In the male, you find the spermatic cord and the ilioinguinal inguinal nerve in the canal. So by the time you dissect the spermatic cord, you see the content of the spermatic cord. Are you clear? So the spermatic cord actually is like a cord linking the testicles. So it means that, you are all aware that the testes, they produce sperm cells. After they produce the sperm cells are conveyed through a gutter, a tubule, that now convey those sperm cells to the outside through the penis. So the ductal system of the testicles and the structures around the duct is what constitute the spermatic cord. So the spermatic cord is nothing but the duct that conveys the sperm cells from the testes, as well as the structures around that duct. And that duct that conveys the sperm cells from the testes is what we call vas deferens, which we'll discuss later on. So what are the structures of the spermatic cord? The spermatic cord has 15 contents, or we can say has 14 contents. We will see why it is 14, not 15. As I told you before, as the testicles are coming out from the posterior abdominal wall down into the outside wall, they carry along 3 fasciae. The first fascia is what we call the internal spermatic fascia. The internal spermatic fascia is the transversalis fascia that I have discussed to you before. The next fascia, covering the spermatic cord is what we call cremasteric fascia. This cremasteric fascia comes from the internal oblique muscle of the abdomen. And then the other one is the external spermatic fascia, which is from the external oblique aponeurosis. So we have 3 major fasciae covering the testicles. It also has 3 arteries. These 3 arteries around that ductal system of the spermatic cord, we have testicular artery. That testicular artery, because the testicles, they develop from the posterior abdominal wall. That's what we call abdominal aorta, coming all the way from the thorax. So that abdominal aorta, as it comes down into the abdomen, it gives branches because these ovaries or testicles, they develop from the posterior abdominal wall closer to the aorta. So the arteries supplying the testicles are also from the aorta because of previous history. Are you clear? So that is why the testicles or the ovaries are being supplied by branches from the abdominal aorta. So you have testicular artery with regard to the testicles. You have ovarian arteries from the abdominal aorta with regard to the females. So we have testicular artery within the spermatic cord. We also have an artery supplying the vas deferens, that ductal system from the testicles. We also have artery to the cremaster muscle. This cremaster muscle actually is a muscle that is, from the internal oblique muscle. If you can remember, we said as the internal oblique muscle now, originating from the lateral half of the inguinal ligament, as it passes upward and medially, it arches over, you understand, over the roof, over the inguinal canal to form the roof, together with the transversus abdominis muscle. So part of those fibers now, as they arc over the canal, they also serve as muscles to contract the spermatic cord during sexual intercourse. Such portion of the internal oblique muscle along the spermatic cord is what we call cremaster or cremasteric muscle. You get my point. So the cremasteric muscle is just part of the internal oblique muscle of the abdomen, and there is an artery supplying that muscle, and that artery comes from the inferior epigastric artery. That inferior epigastric artery is a branch from the external, the artery, what is it called? The abdominal aorta, as it comes inside the pelvic cavity, it divides into 2. You get my point? Common carotid artery. You get it? So the common carotid artery, we have left on the right, and then one on the right and one on the left side. That common iliac artery, I can say, not carotid. Common iliac artery, as it divides into left and the right common iliac arteries, we have what we call internal iliac artery and external iliac artery. So the inferior epigastric artery is a branch of the external iliac artery. So it passes upward like that. And so also we have external iliac vein draining, a tributary from, from the external iliac vein. We also have inferior epigastric vein. So these vessels, inferior epigastric artery and the inferior epigastric vein, they go together superiorly and medially, so that they form an angle here. They form a triangle here. This triangle is what we call a Henderson-Hasselbalch triangle. Then we will see the clinical significance of this triangle when we want to discuss the issue of hernia. So now we've seen that the artery to the cremasteric muscle is from the inferior epigastric artery. Since we said that this inferior epigastric artery is a branch of the external iliac artery. Are you clear? So now we have, you know that the external iliac artery, as it comes out of the abdomen, it becomes femoral artery. So it changes name. It is just the same artery. From inside, it is called external iliac, and then once it comes out, it is called, femoral artery. Are you all clear? Good. Now we've seen, and then the other artery is what we call artery to the vas deferens. So that duct that conveys the sperm cell from the testicles, it also has an arterial supply. And that arterial supply comes from an artery supplying the bladder. You get it? So that is what we call superior vesical artery. So from the superior vesical artery, that branch from that artery supplies the vas. So we have three arteries. Testicular artery from the abdominal aorta, artery to the vas from the superior vesical artery, and the artery to cremasteric muscle from the inferior epigastric artery. It also has, or it contains, three veins. These veins, they correspond to the arteries. It also has three nerves. The three nerves associated with the spermatic cord is what we call sympathetic nerves. You see, since we said that the spermatic cord, contains arteries. So all these arteries, either testicular artery or artery to the vas or artery to the cremasteric muscle, they are all supplied by nerves, autonomic nerves. This autonomic nervous system is what we call sympathetic nerve, for the vessels to, be able to function well. So the vessels are being supplied by sympathetic nerve. So sympathetic nerve are contained within the vessels of the spermatic cord. So we have sympathetic nerve. We also have nerve to the cremasteric muscle. Since we said that some of those achin fibers from the internal oblique, as they arc over to form the roof, they also form the cremasteric muscle over the canal. And so this cremasteric muscle receives a nerve supply from one nerve, what you call genitofemoral nerve, which is part of the lumbar plexus. So a branch from the genitofemoral nerve supplies the cremasteric muscle. And so we have two nerves. The other nerve, which is inguinal nerve, is not within the spermatic cord, but rather it is outside the spermatic cord. That is why we said, if this is the spermatic cord, this is the testis. Let me just try to draw it well. If this is the testicle, and this is the spermatic cord, I just cut portion of it. That is the spermatic cord. So the inguinal nerve is just outside it. So it's like when you cut across this and then you look at it end on like this. So we are going to see something like this. This is the spermatic cord. And so this is your inguinal nerve outside. So that means the inguinal nerve is outside the spermatic cord, not inside. So all these remaining 14 contents, they are all inside here, surrounded by all those fasciae. You get my point? So, but the inguinal nerve is outside the remaining 14 contents. But to make it complete, to make it rule of 3, spermatic cord rule of 3. That is why we put ilioinguinal nerve as part of the third content of the inguinal canal. So it means that ilioinguinal nerve is not part of the content of the spermatic cord, but rather it is the content of the ilioinguinal canal. You get my point? So ilioinguinal nerve is one of the contents of the inguinal canal, but not part of the content of the spermatic cord. I'm sure you now know the differences. So apart from these contents, spermatic cord has 3 other structures. Those other structures, we said the major content of the spermatic cord is a vas deferens, because it is a major tube that conveys the sperm cells from the testicles. From the testes, the sperm cells, they pass through the vas deferens and then they get out through the penis. You get my point? So we have seen the vas deferens in the major substance or content of the spermatic cord. The next structure is the lymphatics. Lymphatics, they drain limbs from all those structures that form the spermatic cord. And then the last one is what you call patent processes vaginalis. In some individuals, there is a remnant of the patent processes vaginalis, part of the remnant of the embryonic tube. So if it persists, so it is being counted as part of the content of the spermatic cord. So I think we have a break now.